I filed a public information request to release the Hoffman Files. Ken Paxton just rejected it. Adam Hoffman was a well-connected lawyer who abused an 8-year-old boy. He should be spending his life in prison. But instead, Ken Paxton gave him a sweetheart deal, letting him out of jail after just 29 days.
That was James Tallarico, the Democrat running for U.S. Senate in Texas, announcing that Ken Paxton's office had officially refused to release the Hoffman Files. And to understand why that refusal matters, why it might be the biggest story in the biggest Senate race in the country, you need to hear the whole story, because it's worse than you think. It starts in Waco in June of 2022. Adam Hoffman, a local attorney, was arrested and later indicted for continuous sexual abuse of a young child. Prosecutors said he abused his own son's friend, a little boy, repeatedly over a 3-year period that began when the child was in elementary school. Continuous sexual abuse of a child is a first-degree felony in Texas, and it carries up to life in prison without parole. That's how seriously Texas treats this crime. Now, normally, the local district attorney would prosecute, but the McLennan County DA had to recuse himself because Hoffman had consulted him for legal advice before he was elected. So the case went to the office of the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. In June of 2025, the case went to trial. The child took the stand and testified about what was done to him, and the jury was deadlocked 7-5 in favor of guilty, a mistrial. The state could have retried the case. Instead, here's what Paxton's office did. They offered Hoffman a deal. The felony that could have put him away for life was reduced to 2 Class A misdemeanors. The original offer was 1 day in jail and time served. He'd keep his law license at the same time. And because the plea paperwork admitted abuse of an individual without ever specifying that individual was a child, Hoffman wouldn't have to register as a sex offender. A man a jury leaned towards convicting of abusing a little boy for 3 years was looking at 1 day in jail and no registry. Even the judge couldn't believe it. Visiting Judge Roy Sparkman balked and demanded prosecutors explain how the deal served justice. At that point, the offer was bumped to 30 days, and at sentencing, Sparkman doubled it himself to 60. And he said something remarkable from the bench. He noticed that when Paxton's office takes a serious felony to trial and gets a mistrial, the case suddenly becomes, in his words, a little misdemeanor with a slap on the hand. A pattern, his word, not mine. Hoffman served 29 of those 60 days and was released early for good behavior. He has since moved to Nebraska, where thankfully, he does have to register as a sex offender. Nebraska requires it. Texas, under Paxton's deal, did not. Paxton's office says the deal was made in the child's best interest because the boy didn't want to testify a second time. And protecting a child from more trauma is a real consideration. Nobody disputes that. But listen to what the boy's own mother said at sentencing. She said everyone involved bent the system to protect Hoffman instead of her son. Her words? That is not justice, that is manipulation. That is betrayal. And here's the thing. This was never a partisan story. Republican state lawmakers held press conferences demanding answers. The Republican chair of the House Judiciary Committee invited Paxton to come and explain the deal. Paxton ignored him. John Cornyn ran ads on it in the Republican primary. Conservatives called it an Epstein-style deal. Then, Donald Trump endorsed Paxton. Paxton won the runoff, and Republican outrage suddenly went quiet. Tallarico didn't go quiet. On June 19th, his campaign filed an open records request for everything. Every memo, every email, every text inside the Attorney General's office about how this deal came together, who proposed it, who approved it, whether anyone even bothered to object. On July 2nd, Paxton's office denied the request. All of it. They're withholding everything, claiming they're protecting the victim's privacy. But Tallarico's campaign says they've been in contact with the victim's family, and what the family wants is answers. Why the sweetheart deal? Why no registry? Why he's back on the street? You could protect a child's privacy and still release the internal communications about how prosecutors made their decisions. That's not a hard line to draw, unless the communications are the problem. Ken Paxton is asking Texans to promote him to the United States Senate. Before they vote, they deserve to see the Hoffman Files. Tallarico is now building bipartisan pressure to force them out. And every day Paxton refuses, one question gets louder. If there's nothing to hide, why is he hiding it?